Welcome to Making Our Way Forward, a podcast where we share compelling life stories and learn from the experience of everyday entrepreneurs. At NACCE, we celebrate diversity and invite you to join the conversation as we talk to entrepreneurs and leaders from all walks of life. We hope that by telling their stories, we bring you inspiration, empower you to take action, and ignite entrepreneurship in your community. Welcome to Making Our Way Forward. I'm really happy to be here today in our Raleigh studio with a very special guest who is also a very dear friend, an entrepreneur, an author, a veteran, a wonderful family member who's really making a difference in the university and college environment and entrepreneurship. So it's my pleasure to welcome Clinton Day to the program. Hi, Clinton. How are you doing today?
Very good, Becky. It's nice to be here.
Well, it's great to have you here. And you and I have been friends for many years, and you have been a very strong supporter of NACCE as a keynote speaker, as an author, and as a contributor to many of our projects. And we're going to get into that. But you might know that we now have over 15 countries around the world that listen to our podcast, and we're almost in 200 cities as of this morning. So we have a lot of people listening, and you'll have the opportunity to share your story. But I'd love to start in the early days, because there is that discussion about our entrepreneurs born or made, and I know you have an opinion about that. But why don't you share with us a little bit about Clint Day? Who are you, and where did your story begin?
Well, I had a head start in entrepreneurship. My dad was a self-employed insurance broker in downtown San Francisco, and he sort of came up the hard way, starting at age 14 with his mother supporting her too, from Montana. So he scraped his way up. It was, I think, if you ask someone about the insurance industry in San Francisco, they would remember a guy named Curtis Day. And he preached to me that it was important to be self-employed. And I mean, this sounds so silly today, but I remember ringing in my ears his admonition that if you're not self-employed, you're a complete failure. Well, heck, I didn't want to fail. So I was always aiming towards self-employment. And it's actually funny, as I got to be out of the Army and come back to San Francisco, I worked for him for a while, but first worked for a major brokerage called Johnson and Higgins. And when I worked for my dad, I just still had an ambition to do it out from under his wing. And actually, as you know, I moved to Jacksonville, Florida with Donna, my wife, and a partner in business, and proved that I could do it in a different location.
I think that's wonderful. And we hear a lot sometimes for entrepreneurship students is that their parents and family members want them to get a safe job, which what is that anymore, in terms of how the world has been tipped upside down. But you and I had spoken a bit about the insurance industry, which I think is really interesting. I had shared with you when I worked for Rowan College at Burlington County. This goes back about 10 years ago. Our foundation board took a great interest in that career path for students because people were retiring from the industry. And it was one of those opportunities where you could be very successful. It wasn't always dependent on a college degree, but maybe for people that have preconceived notions of what the insurance business is like, why don't you share with us what was that experience like working in that industry, and what opportunities do you see for young people that might not have naturally considered that as a career choice?
Anybody with ambition and desire can be successful in insurance, but there's a great distinction between the two branches. On the one hand, you have property and casualty, both personal and commercial, which I did. And then you have life and health on the other hand. Life is very much a keep writing new business because that's all they want, are new submissions. And it's sort of a product that people may need and may not need. So it's always been a little bit pushy. Life and health, property and casualty, on the other hand, is business insurance and very professional. I mean, There's a degree called CPCU, which took me 11 years to get it, like a CPA in insurance. And you have to know a certain level of knowledge in particularly the casualty field and the fire to judge exposures for a business and to talk intelligently and make sure you don't miss out on covering something. So that's really the professional end of the business. And personal insurance and property and casualty and commercial are both very lucrative for this one reason. My dad used to preach it. They have renewals. Every year, the insurance renews. And if you don't mess up and do something bad, they're going to stick with you. And so every year you can build on a base of more accounts, more revenue, which is basically premiums that have a percentage at the bottom, maybe 10 to 15%, and in certain lines of coverage, higher in commission. So it really has an opportunity for anyone. And the best way to learn it is really to go to a community college where they offer an AA degree, Associate of Arts or Science in business with a concentration in property and casualty insurance.
That's great. And I think you're right. I mean, looking at the business model and in terms of how do you make revenue, you're not, always having to go and get a brand new group of customers. One of the things I know about you, Clint, that I love is your love for your family. Your wife Donna is a wonderful partner, I'm sure, in life, and together you do a lot with your family. And I noticed that she was quite entrepreneurial too. And I think it would be fun for you to share with everybody her background. I was surprised that I just assumed she was in business like you were, but she's taken a different path. And I think that would be fun. If you don't mind, just share a little bit about Donna, how you've worked together and some of the things that you're doing together now.
Oh, I love to talk about Donna. I mean, I was 28 when I met her and got married. I never met anyone in my life quite like her, but she was an entrepreneur before I was. She used to go around in her little Greer, South Carolina neighborhood with a cigar box for her cash payments from mowing the lawn. And then at Christmas, she sold Christmas cards throughout the same neighborhood. So when she was looking around from the University of Georgia in Athens for a career, she was taking pure science and really headed to be a doctor. And she did well in chemistry. And a lady came to visit. This was actually her first 2 years in college from the Army at Fort McPherson, 3rd Army in Atlanta, and talked about a career in medical services branch as a physical therapist. And she had known a self-employed physical therapist in Athens, Georgia. So it struck a bell with her. Mm-hmm. And so when she graduated basically in pre-med, she immediately applied to the physical therapy program in the Army. And in those days, it was all women. Now it's co-ed. Mm-hmm. In fact, a lot of people from the service academies get in, men and women. And it would probably be more competitive. But she was one of about 30 people in the class of, I believe, 1970 or 71 that went out to Fort Sam Houston, Texas, and took the course. You graduate as a second lieutenant, and you're a certified physical therapist. You're degreed in it. And mm-hmm. what that means is you get paid to be an officer and study. So the first day at school, you're getting paid as an officer. She figured all that out. She's very entrepreneurial. And of course, she was my partner in every one of my insurance agencies, except the last one where she did everything on the marketing and the conventions, but her parents had fallen. So she spent equal time in the business and equal time up in South Carolina with her parents.
Wow, they say happy wife, happy life. And you two really exemplify that.
I got very lucky.
Yeah, but it's work, it's always work to maintain really good family relationships. And I always admired that about your family and your nephew and all of the people that I've met that are related to you. I would love to dive in a little bit to your experience as an author. I know when I started working at NACCE, you sent me some of the work that you've done that you had turned into a resource that somebody could put on their wall and kind of reference it. But I'd like to focus in on the book that you are publishing this week as we broadcast this episode of the podcast. And I want to begin just reading a quote from you. And then I want you to tell us a little bit about how that project developed and a bit about your chapter on igniting. So, Clint, you write, your power quote is, build value and the world will reward you beyond measure.
Well, that's exactly what entrepreneurs do. Everything they do is building value because somebody has to see that it's desired and pay you for it. So it could be a product or a service, but um, so true. If you have something that someone else wants to buy and it's a better idea or a more creative product, there'll be a path to your door. And that's the secret. You have to come up with an idea or a concept that has something new and of course is competitively priced. And that's what every entrepreneur who's been successful has done. And what I would do, my secret, I didn't realize it till I got to Jacksonville, was I was a trained broker in San Francisco where I understood commercial risk on big accounts. So when I got to Jacksonville, I contracted with what they call a direct writer. The name was Cotton States, but some other direct writers are like State Farm, Nationwide, or Allstate. And they have direct agents, meaning an independent can't really use you. You have to be wholly their own agent. And so I took a commitment to work for Cotton States, and I was the second commercial agent in Florida, but the only commercial agent in Jacksonville. And that means there were other agents, but they were doing personal lines like homeowners and autos. So they were so competitive that I was writing, I hate to say this, but I'm looking back, I was writing accounts as fast as I could get to them. And of course, that drew the attention of my competitors who tried desperately, flew to Atlanta to get an appointment with Cotton States, but they were protecting me due to their captive nature. And so I had quite a run there when I first started my first agency, and I left Jacksonville having just closed the school bus fleet, 700 school buses, which they were crazy enough to write. But that was my secret. I was using the sort of a commercial brokerage approach with a direct writing company, and that was unique. So you have to have something unique and different than the competition to really spark.
Yeah. And I know you are, in addition to all of that, you are a professor now. So you teach students about that and looking for those opportunities and what distinguishes you from the competition. Another interesting thing about your background is you are a veteran, and I know you write about it. I was reading about it the other day in your chapter. You talk about what kind of an impact that made in your life, and maybe you could share a little bit about that.
Well, the first thing to share is that's how I met Donna. She was a physical therapist at Presidio San Francisco when I got back from Vietnam. And I don't believe two people from California and South Carolina would have met but for the Army. But the thing about the Army was, and it's also related to entrepreneurship, leadership is often included in an entrepreneurship study. And one thing the Army will do, particularly in a combat environment, is teach you to be a leader. You're constantly solving problems. And I tell the story in the Ignite chapter about as a second lieutenant, foolishly drinking a beer on my duty officer night, I got called to General Westmoreland's headquarters. It was called MACV, Military Assistance Command Vietnam. And his duty officer, instead of being a second lieutenant, was a bird colonel. And there are colonels and there are colonels, but bird colonels are like a one-star general. And this guy had gotten a flash message from SINCPAC, who at one time was John McCain's father, the commander-in-chief in Hawaii for the Pacific Theater. And I just don't remember the particulars, but I knew right away it was a trial message. It was not a real message, it was a test. And so I told the colonel, you don't need to do anything that, in terms of action, you just need to acknowledge receipt. And he didn't believe me. He was so nervous by this message that he sort of threatened me. As I recall, it might have been a court-martial threat.
Oh.
And I tell him the story. I'm shaking in my boots, but I stood my guns and my belief, and I left thinking, well, if I am wrong, my Army days are over. But I wasn't. I had made the right call, and all things went well. But that was a real scary moment.
I imagine, especially early on, you didn't have as much life experience to draw upon. But tell us about some of the hopes that you have for the future, because you write about a little bit in your chapter of, great blessings, but also great challenges. And certainly this past year has been a challenge for everyone.
Very
and
true.
yeah, I mean, how do you, when you and Donna and, kind of reflect on, what this time has taught you and where you would like to see yourself on the other side of it, would be interesting to hear.
Well, COVID had a profound impact on jobs. There's a lot of people that won't get the jobs they had back. And
Mhm.
we already had two serious trends underway when the pandemic came. One was the gig economy, where corporations know they can save a lot of money by hiring independents, no benefits, and other things. The second thing is automation had taken place in blue collar industries like automobile manufacturing, but because of artificial intelligence and the ability of data to find patterns and um, professionals in the field to write software, they could automate white collar work too. For example, in the insurance business, all of the State Farm claims inside has been automated, and you call and talk to a bot. And you only see a human being when an adjuster comes out to the claim location. So it's happening in financial industry and insurance industry first, but it's going to permeate all of business. It's a little scary. And then you had the pandemic, which decimated the cruise industry, the restaurant hospitality industry, and really got the attention of how precious a job was. So entrepreneurship is the only thing I know of as a partial solution. If you have an interest or a hobby or past work that you are passionate about, we can teach you how to go into business for yourself. Why is that? Well, until 2012, I couldn't say that. But the method I learned came right from Steve Blank, the father of lean startup in California. And that is evidence-based entrepreneurship, where you develop your idea, your concept by using the end user, the person that's going to spend money on your product or service, helping you design it. You run into a stone wall on solving some problem, and you go after the person that needs it, and they help you solve it. So it's a brilliant method to start your own business. And the great thing about it is you don't spend a lot of money ahead of time, which is what they used to do, because you wait until you've had validation from that end user that it's going to work, it's needed, before you scale up, even hire your first employee. So anyone can be an entrepreneur if they have enough desire. That's the key. How do you motivate someone to have the passion and the persistence to put up with the original 2 or 3 years where you're under the gun and you're 24/7? And if you can break through that, we say entrepreneurs are people who are willing to do what others won't, so that someday they can live like others can't.
Oh, that's beautiful. And that is a perfect segue, I guess, to Millionaire Day. To our producer, Natalia Berezhna always does a great job in trying to connect the dots. And, often in, American higher education, you're taught you have to, follow a prescriptive path. If you want to make money, you have to choose within certain parameters. And what I hear you say, and reading many of the things that you've written over the years, is that you're suggesting, and you do this in your chapter in the book that will be released this week, on igniting action steps. So these are some of the ones that you've shared in your writing, and I've heard you lecture and speak as well. You talk about developing the mindset, the entrepreneurial mindset, and watching TED Talks. You suggest some of those in your book, and I think that is a great way anybody can get on YouTube and Google talks that inspire. The second point you have, and I'd like you to respond to this one, is to choose an idea you are passionate about that fills a need. It can be a hobby, interest, or past work, but you have an emotional investment. So speak about that.
Emotion is what gives you the ability to persist through tough times, and the passion about doing better and getting your product out to people to help them. I mean, my combination, and I'll use the insurance industry as an example, of the direct writer, who was always less premiums than a Hartford or a Travelers, together with a corporate background in agency where you could give them the service and analysis with a cheaper premium, was a value item that people could take advantage of as soon as they met me. They just didn't know it. I had to convince them.
Yeah, and you did.
But the insurance industry enables a person to be in business for themselves and accumulate those renewals and build a business so that eventually, I don't know a single person that was in the property and casualty end of the business and had a cut of their own product, their own production, that didn't become financially successful. I don't know one. And the reason is, if you work hard and you stay at it over 20 years, 30 years, you're bound to make more money than being salaried somewhere else. And that's what happened to me. And I just have to tell you this, there's one thing about the millionaire mindset that is discussed in that book I referred you to, The Millionaire Next Door, bestseller about 2001, rewritten, brought up to date in 2010. But The Millionaire Next Door, his mindset is very similar to an entrepreneurial mindset, which we're both so familiar with. And that is that they have an ability to see opportunity and to take action to do something about it, and sort of know who the market might be that would be interested in that idea. The whole package together is so similar. They say that to know a millionaire mindset, you've got to have a balance sheet affidavit, but to know an entrepreneurial mindset, you've got to become income statement affluent. In other words, one is the the account at the end of the run, and the other is the year-to-year revenue production, but they're very similar. And I think the story that I tell people is I had been in business with this hot product called Cotton States in Jacksonville only a year or less. And the largest broker in Jacksonville took me to lunch at the top of the River Club and Prudential Building in Jacksonville and wanted to buy my business. I was just shocked. I was absolutely astounded. I'm a fledgling business. I've only written 20 accounts, but I've taken business away from him and others. So obviously they had been to Atlanta and tried to get Cotton States because it's such a competitive industry. That's why you got to have a leg up in some way. And they wanted to buy me, not for me, but for my market. So what Donna and I did was we came home and we thought about it. We said, well, we're just getting started. We're not willing to sell yet, but let's log this thing called a harvest method, a way to close your business out when you built it for the future. And so I learned how to sell your business when I wasn't even thinking of starting my business for that purpose. And sure enough, we grew into Atlanta and we needed to move there. So I did use the idea of selling your business as a exit from Jacksonville, and first money I ever had was in the equity position of the account. So not only in the insurance business, my father used to say it's a racket. Do you have renewals every year, but you build a book that has value and can be sold. And usually it's about 2 times annual revenue.
That is, I mean, that is so simple to understand. I think challenging to execute. And the other thing is, it seems that your focus on customer experience and customer delivery has differentiated you as well. And I don't know if you can speak to that, but one of the things that I know just from knowing you over the years is that it's very important to you that people have that experience. And if you have multiple choices, you're going to go with who you trust, or so you corner the market, but to grow it and build it. So maybe we only have a few minutes left, but talk a little bit about that, Clint, of that customer experience and maybe some of the clients over the years that you've had that kept coming back to you.
Well, you have to look like a professional, and I learned that working for other brokers. So I always wore a coat and tie. I don't do that teaching. I wear a polo shirt, but and then you want to present a good appearance and know what you're talking about. And that's the knowledge part of it. And that's why I always tried to learn more about property casualty, studying for the CPCU, et cetera. When you go in and you bid something like the school bus fleet, he's got to have confidence in you. And one of the things we were able to do is I was a CPCU, and my lead customer representative, who was an ex-underwriter named Linda Burton, she was a CPCU. So we would explain what a CPCU meant to give us credibility. But you have to present the right aura. And my secret of having a direct writer with a lesser premium combined with a brokerage service did have higher standards of service. Like, I continued all the things I learned. Like, I would never, ever bind a bit of coverage without a written document and a copy of it going to the company. That was your authority. That was the thing that made a record out of your binding. And then you always have to keep your ethics and integrity about you. I remember one time I wrote an auto dealer in North Georgia, which was in a rural area called Cleveland, Georgia. In fact, that's the little town where they make Cabbage Patch dolls.
Oh,
Anyway, they had a wood burning stove in the back of this old dealership. And I found out that one of the requirements, an absolute outlaw of writing an auto dealer with this company called Grange Mutual, was having a wood burning stove, which I knew they lit in the winter. This is North Georgia. So I actually lost some business. I blew the whistle on it. I told my underwriter, he says, well, you got 30 days notice of cancellation. And he canceled my dealer that day. But that built credibility with the insurance company because you were being honest and you were, adhering to their underwriting guidelines. So things like that were critical. I did get criticized throughout my career by underwriting managers that I tried to strong arm them too often. I was always client oriented, always trying to get the best deal and do what I would do and were I the buyer. And that was always a fine line.
yeah, I think leaning into that integrity and sometimes we've talked about this on other episodes. We talk about this a lot at NACCE. It's sometimes we have people that want to give us money or give us a grant and it's not mission aligned. And we, like you, sometimes it's hard to leave business on the table, but in the long run, you're running a long game of really being a trustworthy partner. I want to thank you as we get to the end of the program. You've done so much for our membership. You have been a mentor to me personally, and you have very generously donated, you and Donna, to our Everyday Entrepreneur Venture Fund. So through your generosity, there are people of color, veterans, women who will have that opportunity to start a business. Some of these are people that don't qualify for bankable loans, but are going to community colleges and need $5,000 or $6,000 to start an everyday business. So I say to you, thank you for sharing your story. I want to encourage everyone to go out and get a copy of this book. So Clint, why don't you tell us again what the title of the book is and where people can purchase it?
So the title is Ignite the Entrepreneur, and there's 35 chapters, 35 individual stories. Mine's just one of how they built their entrepreneurship endeavor. And there's women entrepreneurs. There's a couple of veteran entrepreneurs. There's every type you can imagine. But I would encourage anyone who has any desire to try and get a copy. It's going to be sold as an ebook and as a regular book. And they could just email me, and I'd put them in touch with the seller. It'll be on Amazon. That's the best.
That's great. That's true.
But the publishing company in Canada has had many of these books. Ignite the wellness, ignite happiness, and they're all just specialized on the one word, and it's quite an organization.
It's interesting. You went with a Canadian publisher. The second book that NACCE published, we went with a publisher in the UK, and it was a very different experience than some of the US publishers, just a different business model. But we found that too, that they tend to publish around series. So if people want to do something, they can get a lot of different voices. So Clint, we're going to have you come back so that we can continue the conversation. But I want to thank you for your leadership, for your generosity, and for your friendship. And I would just encourage everyone, do what you can, reflect back on your life experience as Clint has with his, and all the blessings that you have are multiplied by giving back to others. So thank you for joining us.
I want to thank you because I was in NACCE, the National Community College Entrepreneurship Association, before you were. And
that's right.
We have been so well led since you arrived. We have new strategic partners. We've increased our membership. and you've started things like this podcast. I mean, we are so fortunate, Becky, to have you as our CEO, and I thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. So wishing you a wonderful day. Thank you, everyone, and make it a good day.
Thank you so much for joining us. We hope that listening to this podcast will help you to explore the many ways we might define entrepreneurship. Join us every other Wednesday for more episodes as we celebrate opportunity, learn from one another, and grow together. Subscribe to this podcast, connect with us on social media, and learn more about today's speakers at NACCE.com/podcast. We look forward to making our way forward together with you.
Have you heard about our latest book, Impact Ed? How Community College Entrepreneurship Creates Equity and Prosperity? This is our roadmap for building back better in 50 states and globally. In each chapter, we share the inspiring stories of everyday entrepreneurs and explain how community colleges play a crucial role in their success. Visit us at NACCE.com/impacted to order your copy now and join us in this work.